Hello, welcome to another edition of Sally's Astrology Book Club. We are concluding our discussion of Howard Sasportas and Liz Green's book on the luminaries. Last week, we talked about Liz Green's version of the sun in our chart. This week, we'll look at Howard Sasportas' essay. He picks up where Liz Green left off, saying that the sun is our path in life, what we're attempting to become. He said many people would say to him, I read the description of Taurus, but yet I don't really feel I resonate with it. And his response would be, well, it's not who you are, it's who you're becoming. That you are becoming this person who's using that very Venusian ability to build something meaningful and lasting and stable. And so this is your lifelong quest. He said that our moon is something that we are kind of given. The sun is something that we aspire towards. He said we should acknowledge our moon, but we should become our sun. He says that he uses the archetypal version of the mother and the father, saying the mother is the lunar person in our life, our moon, who nurtures us, keeps us safe. It's the father who's the solar figure, who encourages us to expand our horizons and to move on beyond the realms of the secure little nest that we're born into. Of course, Howard Sasportas acknowledges that the role of parents has changed in society, but archetypally, there are those two images of the mother and the father. And so the sun in the chart often says something about the father in one's life, as well as our path to self-actualization. If we look at the sign the sun is in, that describes the path that we're on. If we look at the house, it's where we're most, it would be most fruitful for us to put our energies and to shine. And then the aspects are the energies that we meet along the way, and sometimes the people that we meet along the way. I wanted to find a chart to demonstrate a very heavily aspected sun, and so I turned to the chart of Whitney Houston, who, as you can see, was born with that sun in its own sign of Leo, exalted, or not exalted, but in its own in domicile. And so, you can think, a singer who was massively famous for most of her life, had amazing gifts that she brought to the world, definitely Leo's sun. If you look at her moon, though, you can see she has a very well placed moon in Aries, and it very much describes that nest that she was nurtured in. Her mother was a famous gospel singer. And then she also comes from a lineage of women who are very strong singers, including the pop sensation Dionne Warwick. And so with that Jupiter moon, you can see that these are strong women, very confident, putting themselves out there, very religious based with Jupiter there. And so they recognized her gifts and talents. And so you can see, as we've got that trine from the moon to the sun, that these women recognized Whitney's talents, encouraged them, and she emerged really as a teenager still, as a massive pop sensation. And so that moon then is very well placed in her chart. And of course, it's also lovely how it's trine the midheaven and creating a grand trine with the sun. But the sun itself is more complicated. Of course, it's with Venus, which gives it her artistry a boost here, that she's able to bring her gifts into the world in a way that people just love what she expresses. But we see too, though, that moon is in what's called aversion to the ascendant. That sun is in aversion to the ascendant of Pisces. Pisces is very open, very permeable, wants to be all things to all people, can shift and change as people want them to shift and change. Someone very soulful and otherworldly, all those things around Pisces, but that Leo sun just wants to shine as an individual, they don't really want to be who other people want to be. They want to be themselves. And so you can see in Whitney's life that there was that tension put up between the person everyone was expecting her to be and that inner fire that wanted her just to, stand up on a stage and sing and just be who she was without anyone else telling her how she should be. And also, when you put the sun in the sixth house, that's a tricky place for it. Not only does it not see the ascendant, which gives it less power, but this is a house of hard work, toil, servitude. And so you see that her gifts then, and she's able to shine only after a great deal of hard work and effort. And we know from Whitney's life that she became kind of the workhorse of her family, that she was expected to carry, many people financially, that her gifts and talents were something that, she was a star that many people hitched their wagon to, not only in her family, but then professionally. So she was always told she had to work, she had to keep going, because other people were depending on her. So the pure joy of being able to express herself came at a very high price. And also, if we look at some of the aspects to that sun, notice that the sun is applying to an opposition to Saturn. And so remember, the sun says something about the father in our lives, and also Saturn does too. So Howard Sasportas says that we could experience the father as cold and remote, very demanding, very difficult to please. And we know from Whitney's history that her father eventually, I think, became her business manager, expected her to fund a lot of his business schemes and make him wealthy. And of course, you can imagine how all of that plays out. And eventually he and Whitney have a parting of the ways because she doesn't agree with how he's managing her money and her career. And so that led to a long estrangement between them. So you can see that this set up a dichotomy that Whitney is struggling against authority figures in her life who are trying to control and manipulate and really kind of live off of her. This would happen with record executives too, and concert promoters. And she's over here just like, I want to sing my songs. And then everyone else is trying to, in a sense, get a piece of her. So that is a very strong dynamic that she had to learn to stand up to Saturn and face Saturn on her own. That's interesting, though, when in 2003, Whitney's father was suing her for $100 million because he said Whitney backed out of some business deal that he had set up. And so this lawsuit was going on when it was learned her father was terminally ill. And Whitney at that point just said to him, look, let's end this. Let's put this behind us. This is too important. And so at the end of her father's life, they reconciled, and then the lawsuit was dropped after he died. And so it's interesting when you think that she's got that sun is not just in constant battle mode against Saturn, but it's got Neptune over here, kind of opening up that dichotomy, that conflict between this is who I want to be, and then I'm opposing you who's expecting me to be someone else. Neptune is very forgiving. And so you can see that in that she eventually forgave her father. But of course, that powerful Neptune Sun square was evident in a lot of other ways in her life. It could make her very vulnerable to being manipulated, but also it heightened her artistry, that she was able to tap into that ethereal sphere that Neptune is in. And it's why she could sing like she had a chorus of angels at her back. And so that Neptune sun, while it opened her up to some vulnerability that would hurt her in some ways, it also helped explain her gift. But, this explained too, though, that she was oftentimes feeling hounded, a person who had no private life, um, because she was such a public figure, that she didn't have the boundaries around her. In fact, instead of going to her father's funeral, she had her own private memorial service because she didn't want to be, kind of the focus of paparazzi. Also, we see in that square between her sun and that ninth house Neptune, the role of religion in her life, how her early teachings and trainings from the church is where she did her first singing and performing, would be very formative in her life. But with that square, in order to be herself, she would have to break free from that hold that her early religious training had over her. And of course, we see too with Sun, Neptune, sometimes addiction. If you go back to this very stressful life Whitney led, with incredible pressures put on her, that she was expected to be all things to all people, so many people wanting to take advantage of her, that you can see that temptation to slip into drugs or alcohol would be very strong. And also, of course, we see her marriage house is very packed with that Pluto-Uranus conjunction and Mercury. And notice that it's in aversion to her sun in Leo. And so this says that her marriage would be something that would be kind of a distraction from who she wants to be. There would be that struggle between being a partner and being herself, that they were like on two parallel tracks that would have a difficult time meeting and intermingling with each other. And we could spend a lot of time, of course, talking about Bobby Brown and the role he played in her life. So you can see then at the end of her life, which was sadly cut short, that she had, in spite of great difficulties, faced enormous pressures, still managed to prevail as that amazing Leo sun. And we have today, as witness her amazing music, her recordings that will be here to lift hearts for generations to come. So I have to end this talk by just thanking Whitney Houston for all that she has given to us, and realize that she faced many battles on many fronts, and yet was able to shine her light for all of us to see. So thank you very much for joining me today. I enjoyed so much talking about Liz Green and Howard Sasportas's books on the luminaries, that next I'm going to read their book on the Mercury, Venus, and Mars. I'll be talking with you about that soon. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.